Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate the opportunity to allow you the opportunity to meet and hear from some of these candidates, two of the candidates tonight. Um, the meeting is being recorded, and it is going to be put up on the Olympia Indivisible website, as well as the Olympia Indivisible YouTube channel. We ask that you stay muted. If you have questions, put them in chat with an uppercase Q being the first letter so that we'll know that it's a question and not a comment or something. And if it is necessary for you to speak, we'll ask it on mute. Tonight's program, like I say, we have two candidates, both representing one of the new districts that was formed as a result of last year's election. First of all, we'll be hearing from Sarah Tonge, who is running for Port of Olympia in District 5. And after Sarah, we'll be hearing from Emily Clouse, who is running for the Board of County Commissioners in District 5. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Sarah, the first thing, could you just take a few minutes to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and why you're running for this office?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Just making sure I'm unmuted here. Yeah, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate you all attending. So a little bit about me. I live here in Lacey in District 5. I've lived here most of my life. I love the city of Lacey. It's a great place to live. And I live with my partner and my two daughters. They are still young, and I work in technology currently. So I work for a company that's based in Texas, and I work remotely for them online. I'm a technical support supervisor. I manage a team and help run the technical support department throughout the day, the kind of day to day of that. And then before this, I was a trainer for a Washington State software contractor, and I would train on the software in person and over the phone. I was also a leader in that role. And I got to travel nationally at some points too for that job. And then before that, I was a supervisor at a local internet company over here in Lacey, Reach One Internet, before they were bought out by a bigger company. And I really enjoyed that job. I learned a ton there. They had a technology co-location, so lots of servers and just a ton of equipment to learn and play and really get my hands wet. So that's where I started. Professionally. Before that, I attended Western Governors University Bachelor's of IT program, and I earned several technology certifications while attending that program. And before that, I attended Running Start at SPSCC for some general education classes. So that's really my professional background. As far as politics go, I also, like one of you mentioned, got involved around 2015, 2016. Really before the election, I saw what was coming with Trump, and also was very mobilized by Bernie and the Bernie Sanders campaign, and never had heard anything like it. So I jumped in, and in 2016 did as many volunteer hours as I could for Bernie Sanders, phone banking, walking the neighborhoods, just doing online technology coordinating, sending out newsletters, really just organizing for the campaign. Did that in 2016 and 2020. And then I was a Democratic PCO from 2016 to 2020 when someone ran in my precinct and took my spot. But I'm becoming precinct officer in my new precinct here. And then I've also volunteered at the burger booth. So that's really my Democratic experience, political. And then as far as why I'm running, there's a few reasons. Like one of you said, I feel like I can't not run at this time. The way things are with the environment, the protections that we needed to have already that are not happening and actively being reversed as far as environmental and sustainability protections are. I mean, it's too important to be making the decisions that we're making on the environment here with our port. So someone progressive needed to get involved, and I saw your search, and I saw some Progressive Alliance trying to get someone into this role, and I saw the role coming up, and filing week there was no one, and then there was two unknown progressives, and I just knew I needed to get involved, and I truly believe I had the experience and the leadership qualities and collaborative experience to really get in here at the port and make a difference and just drive a more positive vision than what we've seen. So that's
Very
a little
good.
bit about me.
Very good. Thank you very much. So let me get into the prepared questions that I have. So today the Port Peninsula is dominated on the west side by the shipping terminal and a huge pile of logs destined for Japan and China. On the east side, mostly by Swantown Marina and associated operations. What is your vision for what the Port Peninsula might look like 20 years from now? And how would that vision best serve the interests of residents of Thurston County?
Yes. Well, I would like to go forward with the vision that has been created already with removing the dam and removing the dam and the bridge and rebuilding, turning it into more of a natural landscape down there at Bud Inlet once it's cleaned up. And so we can have the natural shoreline and the waterfront as the people wanted in the 2050 vision. Now we're going to have to be very careful with that because of sea level rise. It's happening. It's going to continue to happen. We need to be really super careful about what we're building down there. Is it sustainable? Is it going to be able to be utilized in a long period of time? But mostly I would like to just be able to walk out there and enjoy for recreation. And I think that's what the people should be able to do with that land.
Okay, I'm going to get back to the 2050 plan in a few moments. But first of all, what are your thoughts about, you brought up the dam. What are your thoughts about the long-term viability and desirability of the marine terminal, especially in the context of the dam removal?
Well, in reading over the plans, in my opinion, the dredging that would need to occur to keep the marine terminal operating the way that it is currently is unsustainable. It's just impossible from my mind. Why would we basically pour our money into the water to dredge in an area that doesn't need to be dredged to support something that's unsustainable and hurting the planet? I don't agree.
Okay, thank you. So you've talked about your background in technology, and that'll certainly be helpful as you review some of the projects and spending plans that come before the port and your leadership skills in that. But many of the issues that come before the commission are financial in nature, many if not most of them, and your background doesn't appear to have that knowledge base. How will that affect your ability to consider financial concerns, do you think?
Great question. Well, I am someone who is very open to help and resources and research, and I'm not going to, have anyone do the job for me, but I will be open to learning what I need to learn. And if I don't know what something means, I can look up that term and figure out why it is that way. And if I don't understand, like the depreciation is a great example of this. I'm hearing from both sides that this depreciation should not be counted. From my own research, it does seem like it's depreciation. It should be counted, but more research is needed. And I will continue to ask questions and research and find the right resources to get the information that's needed.
Very good.
Yeah.
So sticking with finances, in fiscal year 2026, the annual debt service for the port, or that the port carries, will increase from 4.5 million to 9.2 million. Disregarding the exact nature of the debt, what do you think the port should do to prepare for this increase, which is 104%?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think first we need to look and see, is there any way to avoid that increase? I would look at any option. Can we refinance or delay the loan or anything like that? Otherwise, the port just needs to start making money. That's the big thing in my mind. We need to figure out how to turn this port around so it's not losing money and hemorrhaging the way it is.
You have ideas on how to do that?
Technology is a big one. Bringing that down, filling those buildings with something else. I really do want to make this a hub for technology, make those companies want to come here. That's one idea, and I'm going to have to keep thinking over the years. I
Sure,
know.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Getting to climate change, which you also brought up, at least in the context of sea level rise. What are your thoughts about whether the port has done an adequate job of assessing vulnerabilities and planning for resilience for climate change? That's a phrase directly out of your questionnaire response. Um, could they or should they be doing more?
Yes, I absolutely think we should be doing more at this time. More research, more studies for sure of what's going on down there, what we think may happen, and then really just planning for the future. I don't think that we have many plans for the near term when these things might start happening. Like we've seen some flooding in downtown Olympia already in the past few years. This could be 2030. I don't think we really have any substantial plans for 2030 for climate change, and we should have those. So I,
Are you
I hope
familiar
it's.
with the study that the city did a few years ago for the sea level rise analysis that they did?
I can't say that I am completely no.
Yeah,
I read it at that time, but I couldn't quote it now or anything.
yeah. Okay, well, I was just curious because, of course, it's all tied into the, as you mentioned, flooding downtown, but also potential flooding issues on the peninsula itself. I've actually been a little surprised that it hasn't had a little more traction than it's had, but
I would agree.
that's an aside. So getting back to the port's vision 2050, can you expand some on your thoughts about that, about the vision 2050 and the destination waterfront plans?
Yes. To start, I feel like both those plans are pretty commercialized and not very transparent from my own perspective. I'll just start by saying that. Really looking at both of them, there's just, it almost seems like missing information or something. But for the living shoreline, I really do agree that we need to open that back up. It should be a living shoreline where people can be out there utilizing that for recreation and their life. But when it comes to the plans of building hotels and other things down there on the water, that is just not going to work long term. We're going to have to come up with other solutions.
Yeah, that's one of the things that strikes me about that plan. The public, I think, made it pretty clear that they wanted more access to the water for recreation and they want the living shoreline, but the plan itself is barely mentions that. It's all about hotels and restaurants and that kind of thing. Uh, yeah, okay. You also mentioned affordable housing in your questionnaire response. You said that the port should encourage affordable housing on some of its properties to help with the homelessness and affordable housing problems we face. Do you have particular properties in mind for where this could occur? And how would the port implement this policy effectively?
I do not yet. I wish I did. I know that they have the two hotels out there in Tumwater, but there are definitely some concerns with those locations. So I think we need to do better, find better. But at this point, I would need to do more research on that. I'm making a note.
Yeah. Well, speaking of land, some people think the port should increase its real estate holdings, while other people think it should divest itself of some of its holdings. Do you have thoughts on that?
It all comes back down to the taxpayer, in my opinion. We're taking the taxpayers' money, and so if we, as the port, were to see some actual opportunity where that real estate would make a lot of money or bring in a huge boon, or we could help the environment because we know that this area is being treated really badly, yeah, maybe the port should take on that real estate. But at this point, the port has so much and it's been so mismanaged and everything's losing money. It's cart before the horse.
Okay, thank you. The managerial situation at the port has been a topic of concern at the port for some time now. There was a group of employees publicly voicing no confidence in the executive director, and there has been a lot of turnover of senior level staff. What is your take on this situation?
A couple things. One, it's untenable. Something has to be done, and it should have already been done. I'm quite surprised that it's dragged on this long. These impacts are huge. When people are lost in an organization like this, I'm sure, as you all know, they need to be trained again. The cost is so large and so widespread. It will be years before we can recover from the 68% loss of knowledge and what those people knew about how to do their jobs. So a lot of retraining is going to be needed. A lot of support for the new employees is going to be needed. It looks like a lot of rehiring is needed. And then as far as the actual situation with the executive director, there are some considerations I may not know. It sounds like some details are being withheld from human resources or something, but from what I can tell, she does just need to resign. If that many people are having this many problems and the culture has turned this bad, I think we just need a new leader to help move forward.
Are there any port issues that are specific to your district, District 5, or maybe not exclusively to District 5, but that District 5 would be most impacted by or be most interested in?
The one that I know of is water. Lacey does have less water resources versus population than the other areas of the city. So at this moment, we don't need to rely on any other, area for water, but maybe that will change down in the future. Lacey's population keeps growing and growing and growing. So I feel like that's the one thing that Lacey's needing at this point.
What role could the port play in dealing with that situation?
I believe it would have something to do with the lot, and maybe they would have to work with reallocating the water and how it's divided between the cities, how they utilize that.
Okay.
I'll have to do more research.
Are there any other questions that anybody else has?
None in the chat, but I could pose a question.
Okay.
There's been a lot of concern about transparency at the port. Deals are made by the staff and then brought forward with very little time for the public to see what's going on, like the Swire deal, for example, which was a considerable deal for the port, and the public didn't get much chance to weigh in, and they just went right ahead with it. A lot of us in the activist community were pretty upset about it. So what do you think it can be done to increase transparency?
Great question. So first of all, increasing just the time, like you said, there should be adequate timelines to review things. They should not be being pushed through in a hurried manner. That doesn't give the public confidence in the decisions. And then also, when these decisions are being made, I think it would be helpful to have some sort of other forum where commissioners can respond to public comment. That does not happen at the meetings, and I do understand why for time at sometimes, but I think an online forum would be an easy solution. And I noticed one of the commissioners last year actually conversing with community members on the Journal of Olympia Lacey Tumwater Online, the Jolt, actually in the comments, just, responding back. And while that may be a little unprofessional in my mind, if we had a moderated online forum where those responses could be sent back to the community and other community members could review them if they had the same question, or maybe didn't even know to think that. Now they know that aspect. It's out there for everyone to read, and it's public record. Of the grandest kind. Anyone can search it and see it for a long time.
Do you think that the commissioners should respond in real time when people come to the meetings and pose questions?
In a perfect world, yes, I think so. I think they should respond to everyone, but there's just, I understand the timeline of the meeting going on for a really long time. That's a tricky one.
Okay. Anybody else want to pose a question from the audience?
I see there's one in chat,
Oh, there we go.
a
Yeah,
couple actually.
yeah, that, Melinda, would you like to read your question? Melinda Holman?
What experience or qualities do you have that might aid you in dealing with potential disagreement among or conflict among colleagues on the board? How would you approach that?
Yes, great question. First of all, just by fact finding, really getting everyone's side. And to begin with, that's what I'm going to be doing in all aspects of this job, is just trying to learn all I can and understand every viewpoint and aspect. And then from there, just asking the right questions that are kind and curious, but also holding them accountable and really helping them discuss their maybe disagreement or disagreement in beliefs where they just can't understand each other. Just asking the right questions to help them come together and find a mutual understanding.
Okay, Lisa Reiner, would you like to unmute and read your question?
Yes, thank you. My question about the issue of jobs and economic development. How can the port help make jobs in our region? Thank you.
Yes. Well, I think we should look towards technology, of course. That's my background and what I'm interested in. And jobs that are well paying, they have upward mobility, they're sustainable. They're jobs that fulfill the American dream a lot of times. So I think by inviting these technology companies to come here and have jobs or create jobs and have their companies here is a great way. And then otherwise, just looking at any other industries we can to help make jobs at the port. But it's, yeah, I would say tech. And especially with, if we're shutting down the marine terminal, that's where I was going. If that eventually happens, those buildings are going to need to be filled with something. So why not technology companies?
Okay, Pam Pride, you could unmute and ask your question.
Yes, hi, Sarah. So you've talked about your interest in bringing technology companies into our area. Can you say more about what kind of technology companies you believe would be appropriate here, and how would you go about attracting them?
Yes, great question. Well, AI is huge. That's the big one. So there's a lot of jobs coming with AI. I know that one of the headlines is we're going to be losing jobs, but there's actually many, many jobs that are going to be created. So by making this a place where those companies want to move, by making it attractive and looking into new opportunities for the port, finding companies that are expanding operations. And I don't have any in mind, any specific companies, but I do know that we can find companies and make this a attractive place for them to bring their business, especially if we have open buildings on a port that we know are going to be empty after the marine terminal operations have ended.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if the port has the ability to do outreach to companies?
That was a good question. I would think so, but I'm going to find out now. Thank you, Pam.
Okay.
Okay, back to you, Dan.
Well, I see Carla has her hand up. Do you have another question, Carla?
Yes, thank you. And hello, Sarah. And I'll lower my hand here. I was just typing one in the chat, but I didn't quite finish it. So I'll just try to summarize where I'm going. So, the current port commissioners feel that their highest priority is economic development. I would even say that they think that's higher than than creating jobs, which they don't do, but they do bring in money, and they do support the executive director because she has been so successful in bringing in money. However, a lot of the funding that they get is from the state, so it's our money, and of course our tax dollars. But in their decisions to approve certain projects, what they often do is they see the dollar signs first, and they don't even bother to think about the environmental impacts of it. And I think that it's a very difficult situation at the port, it seems to me, that their priorities are so based on economic development. They say that's their goal. So I just wonder if you might, comment a little bit on that, because economic development seems to be the reason they consider the port to exist. And there might be other ways to look at the port, but they're not doing that. So I just wonder if you might comment on economic development. And then there's this issue of the executive director bringing in so much money. They love it. She's helping them to fulfill what they consider their highest priority, their reason for being there.
Yeah, well, like I said in my answer about the executive director, I truly don't think we know the monetary impacts of that decision yet. 68% of employee loss is 68% of knowledge and training, and it takes a long time to recover from that. And then as far as economic development goes, that is not the first priority in my mind. And that's been part of my disappointment with the port and part of why I'm running. And it's a systemic issue, bigger in the government as well. Finances come first, the bigger companies come first, the 1% is coming first. And that's not how it should be. It should be the taxpayers and our environment. Well, the environment first, because we're going to need a planet. But then it's those taxpayers before the actual economic development of the business. And if that's not helping the taxpayers, we're just subsidizing, the port to do their operations. It's not okay.
Very good. Thank you. So we're curious about your campaign also, about your fundraising, and you're getting good volunteer support, and if you have a website that we can tell people about. Oh yes, I see we do have a website for you.
Thank you, Lisa. You're on it. So yes, there's my website. Thank you.
Yes.
And yeah, the campaign's coming along. We have a team now, a few people and a group of volunteers. We'll be having a kickoff coming up here on the 29th at the Lacey Community Center at 5 p.m. I'll send out the invite as well to the Olympia Indivisible group so you guys can all see. And yeah, it's coming together. We have some donations now, solid campaign plan. We're going to start canvassing this weekend.
Okay, great. Well, like I say, we did drop your website URL in the chat so people can pick up on that if they want to, need to. That is all I had. Does anybody else have anything? And I see that Emily is here. She's been here and attentive since the beginning, so we can transition right into that but I want to make sure that, Carla again.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple questions to Sarah about your campaign. So you mentioned the kickoff is coming up. And do you have literature yet, or where do you kind of stand on all of that? Yard signs, all that stuff. Is that coming, or is that down the road?
It's coming. Signs have been ordered. I'm just waiting for the order to be ready to be picked up. So any day now. And then the flyers have been designed. They should be printed here soon. And then I do have like digital flyers as well, like digital copies. And then for the kickoff, if anyone's interested.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing some time with us and your thoughts and your ideas. It's been very interesting, and I'm sure everybody appreciates the opportunity.
Yes, of course.
With that, I will introduce Dennis, who is going to talk with Emily. Dennis, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. So Emily, let's see if we can at least interface with each other once. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I know we've emailed back and forth a few times, so it's nice to virtually meet you finally. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, perhaps we'll meet in person sometime soon as well. So first, could you tell us, take a few minutes, tell us about your background and what led you to wanting to run for the commissioner spot? Wait a second, wait a second. I don't think anybody's mentioned Emily is running for Thurston County Commissioner in District 5. So yes, if you could tell us how you got to that point and what your background is.
Definitely. I do believe it was mentioned, just to give Dan the credit. I think that he mentioned in the beginning that I was running for Commissioner District 5. But I appreciate that clarification. My background, I was born and raised here in Olympia, and I've lived here my whole life aside from a 2-year period of time when I was in the Army. And during that time, I lived in Colorado, and I was also deployed to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia when I was 18 years old. So aside from that, growing up here, my mom was a registered union nurse, and my parents built a car wash and coffee stand when I was about 9 or 10 years old, over by River Ridge High School, called Delta Car Wash. And so I have experience living with a family who owned a small business and seeing the ups and downs of that process. When I got out of the Army, I was I was an intelligence analyst. So I have a lot of experience presenting briefs and researching and talking to people who are prolific, individuals within a bureaucratic environment that I don't necessarily agree with all the time. And that kind of influenced my perceptions on how we are developing authoritative industries such as policing here in Thurston County. So when I came back to Olympia, I finished my associate's degree at South Puget Sound Community College. Like Sarah, I was also in Running Start, and when I came back, I decided to study psychology because I went through a few traumatic experiences while I was deployed. So I really was curious about what happens to brains on a cognitive level when people experience trauma. So I graduated and transferred to the University of Washington, Tacoma, where I started a student-led organization called CARE, which stands for the Collaborative Association for Reintegration and Education, to try and kind of reverse that school to prison pipeline and develop what we were calling a college to, a prison to college pipeline to support higher education for those who have been incarcerated. And when I graduated, a few years later, I was granted my disability through the VA for what happened to me while I was deployed. And I used that extra time I had by having that financial security. I was able to step back from working. I was at the time managing my parents' coffee shop. So I have that management experience in small business as well. And I was able to step back from that to finish my schooling. And once I graduated, I used my spare time to start doing outreach on my own with the houseless community here in Thurston County, where I made some really strong connections and made some friends within that community and listened to a lot of their stories. And I started actually basically case managing for them on my own, and realizing that I'm seeing people get into housing, I'm seeing people get jobs, I'm seeing people develop a stable life just with one person's help. So I decided to turn CARE from my college experience into a community-based organization. So I founded CARE Olympia, which is a 501c3 here in Thurston County. And right now we're primarily focusing on reentry and reintegration for justice-involved youth who have either personally been in the justice system or who have experienced what it's like to have an incarcerated family member or loved one that's impacted them in a big way. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm also a state employee with DSHS, and I work in the Office of Forensic Mental Health Services, which I'm the supervisor for the processing and referral team. We process all of the court orders for competency evaluations and restoration for justice-involved folks living with a mental illness. And as a part of that, I actually just flew back yesterday from a presentation I gave in Eastern Washington on that intersection between the legal system and mental health and what the role of my department is, which we call OFFMS, shorthand for what it's actually called because it's kind of long. So I'm really into stuff like that, just getting, networking and educating the community on why these issues are important. As far as the second part of your question, why I got involved, actually one of my board members on CARE's board of directors is also on the board for the South Salish Progressive Alliance, and that's my campaign manager, Sarah DeStasio. And she kind of reached out to me and was like, hey, have you ever considered running for office? Because we have some critical races happening this year. And I was a Democratic PCO back in 2016, also motivated by Bernie Sanders and the movement that he started in our country. I also caucused for Bernie Sanders and made it up to the state level as a delegate for him. And so I do have that experience, and I've always been told by my parents that I should be an attorney or be in debate or something because I care so much about these issues. So when Sarah approached me, I told her, I have been interested, but the opportunity has never really presented itself, and I've kept myself so busy that I haven't really ever gotten my foot in the door with running for anything. So I had my eye on some city council spots, but since I live in unincorporated Thurston County, I decided to run for county commissioner.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one question I had about CARE. Are you going to be able to continue your work with CARE if you are elected?
Yes, definitely. That's actually a question that I really thought about a lot before jumping in because it's really where my passion lies. I know my state job, I would have no issues stepping from that into county commissioner, and my boss and everybody supports me in that decision. But as far as CARE, we recently hired a development director thanks to a grant that we received from the Cowlitz Indian tribe this year. They fully funded us for this year to hire 3 staff members. And since I've been campaigning, I've been able to step back a lot from that. I was putting 40 or more hours a week into CARE, and now I've cut that down to about 20 hours a week. And I foresee that being even more hands-off if I'm able to sustain the funding that we got from the Cowlitz tribe. And we've also gotten a few other funding sources this year as well at the city and county level. So I think that a lot of the foot or legwork that I did in the beginning is paying off because now it's kind of sustaining itself on its own and it's grown a lot. And I actually just stepped down from the board of directors for CARE last week because we had 3 new members step up that have a lot of extensive experience in the community. And that's something I'm really proud of as well. So right now my primary focus is on the campaign. And I think that that sheds light on my ability to prioritize my spot as county commissioner if I'm elected.
Okay, thanks. Just to clarify one thing. So you're called CARE Olympia. Is that part of a larger organization, or did you and some others just come up with this idea on your own?
That's a good question, actually. So it's technically it's just CARE, but I had to make my Instagram name CARE Olympia because CARE was taken. So I made it CARE Olympia, and people kind of just took that and ran with it. So now everybody calls us CARE Olympia, and I've kind of just followed suit, but it is just called CARE. When I first founded it, my idea was that it would be a replicable model that could be expanded to other counties, and we actually do have plans to expand to Mason County starting in 2024. And we're working with the Cowlitz tribe to make that happen. So I'm hoping that based on our success rate now, we can expand that program into other counties and possibly other states in the long term. But right now it's just in Olympia.
Okay, thanks. Just quickly, what experience do you have with budgeting and financial reporting?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is my experience managing my parents' small businesses because I did a lot of the financial management there. as far as, bank deposits. My dad was really transparent with me about what was going on financially. So I was able to kind of give feedback and learn about budgeting in small business when I was managing that. And now my more extensive experience budgeting has all been with CARE. Our Cowlitz tribal grant was $100,000 for this year. And I also manage a handful of monthly donations from individual donors, as well as a $7,500 grant from Thurston County and a $5,000 grant from the Olympia Arts Commission. So those are kind of the biggest chunks of change that I've managed myself, and I've been able to do a really good job with that. As far as, now we're halfway through the year, and out of our initial 50,000 that we got from the Cowlitz tribe, we've only spent about 25,000. And the plan when I first created that budget was to spend that 50,000 by July or August. And so we do have more funds left than what I thought. And we've also been able to not only achieve all of our year 1 goals, but we're already dipping into our year 2 and 3 goals just with that funding, because a lot of, I know that to be sustainable, we really do have to outsource as much as possible. We can't take on everything all by ourselves. So I refer out as much as I can. And that has saved us a lot of money as well. I also have noticed that the more we can help youth and young people build sustainable lives for themselves, the less money we actually have to invest ourselves, which has been a big realization, because in the beginning, I just wanted to take care of everything for everybody. But now when we get requests, I ask them, what can you put into this yourself first? And that's also helped us not have to spend as much as we've thought we would.
Okay, and I sort of noticed out of the corner of my eye a question about what's the size of CARE? What's like an annual budget?
So those 3 grants I mentioned and the individual contributions, I believe that we're sitting around $125,000 per year at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in our questionnaire, you proposed a community management board as one of the things that you thought was important to work with the sheriff's department. Could you explain a little bit of how that would work and how it would actually affect change in the policing?
Definitely. So I really think that we need voices at the table from those who have been impacted the most by these systems. I know that similar to like the issues surrounding homelessness, I think that we need to consult with individuals who are actually living in that experience before making big decisions about where services will be located and where funding is going to go. In terms of the community management board, I'm actually really excited because when I initially talked to one of our commissioners about this idea, I was told that the commissioners don't get a whole lot of say in that because the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, it is an elected position, and they have governance over that department on their own. And I was really bummed out to hear that, but I know that collaborating with the sheriff, I know Derek Sanders is open to that idea, but has not had a whole lot of time to put into it from what I've heard. So I'd like to have a conversation with him about what that might look like and how the commissioners could collaborate with the sheriff's office to bring more community members into the picture to uphold the transparency and accountability of the police. Also, just 2 days ago, somebody from the city of Olympia reached out to me asking me to apply for a collaborative design process involving the Social Justice and Equity Commission and members of the Olympia Police Department. And their goal with that is to establish a framework of transparency and accountability, which is right up my alley. So I'm really excited that I was invited to join that initiative. And I think that at the county level, coming up with initiatives that are similar to that would be a really good idea as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this one may be more aspirational, but you mentioned that you advocate for the eventual abolition of the carceral system. And I'll be honest right here, I had to look up what the word carceral meant, but it has to do with the incarceration system. That's a big part of our justice system. So could you talk about a little bit about what are the alternatives you see to the carceral system, and are there places where such a thing has been implemented successfully?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. That's a big passion of mine. And I know that when people hear the word abolition, they get kind of freaked out and they think it's really extreme. And I always kind of point back to the example of slavery. And when we wanted, when slavery was abolished, it was a good thing. And I also know that the carceral system is based on, um, you know, environments and cultures that have to do with similar ties and alignments to what slavery was built on. I think mass incarceration should not be the way that we handle people who are dealing with crisis situations, mental health, or behaviors that continue leading them to recidivism. And I think that the way we can do that is by building safer and healed communities, holding our community members more accountable for their behaviors, and actually facilitating change at the individual level. I actually have this poster right here that I have for my motivation for this interview that says, create and build safe, healed, and accountable communities and abolish prisons, because I believe that it's possible and I believe that it would be a good thing. I also think that, like you said, it is aspirational, and I don't expect to just snap my fingers and do away with police or prisons. And I think that's what a lot of people assume when they hear somebody say abolish prisons, but that's not what I mean at all. I mean, creating a catalyst for healing for those who are involved in the system at the community level. And I think that that's really where it needs to start. We could do that by implementing more support for mental health. Things like the treatment sales tax is just one step in the right direction. Like I said, we can't snap our fingers and make it happen, but we can make incremental changes to support those going through the system first. Because right now, unfortunately, we do live in a society where we need police. People are scared. People have to rely on the police when something happens and they have nobody else to call. Unfortunately, I've been in situations myself where people have been violent and I've had to call the police for help. So I know that they have stepped in and done helpful things, and I don't, discredit that at all. But I do think that I don't think that reform is the answer. I think a lot of people say, oh, let's not focus on abolition, but let's focus on reform. But we see examples of, school shootings in the Scorpion unit that responded very, very slowly to the school shooting last year. And the Scorpion unit was actually developed for peaceful responses to violence, but they didn't do anything. And that's an example of what reform looks like, and it doesn't work. I think that retraining is great in theory, and in some cases it can help police officers be more accountable and transparent. But then we also see examples of how that doesn't work, and units that receive additional training, they aren't stepping up and actually following through with what they are supposed to learn in some cases. So it kind of reminds me also of a study that I was involved in when I was a research assistant at the University of Washington in Seattle, where we looked into diversity and equity and inclusion policies in the workplace. And it turned out that workplaces who had a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement and training for their staff, in a lot of cases, it's just a one-time thing. They'll provide a training and then go throughout the rest of the year without talking about it. And because they have a policy in place or a statement and they've offered a training, it was found that they're less likely to follow through with what they've learned in those trainings because they think they've checked the box and they don't need that anymore. So I think it's a lifelong journey. I think that we need to start somewhere. And I think that where we can start is by holding people in our community accountable, both on the law enforcement side and the individual community member side, because we do have people who unfortunately exhibit dangerous behaviors. And I think that the right way to deal with that is through healing as opposed to punitive action.
Okay, I'm gonna circle back because I didn't quite hear. Do you have are there examples that you know of where this has actually, is being implemented currently?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example, but I do think to what we've seen in other countries, what we've seen in, Scandinavian countries where they're helping people actually reintegrate into the community and develop skills while they're incarcerated in an environment that's not punitive. Unfortunately, in the United States, I can't think of any examples. I'm sure they do exist in more progressive societies within the United States. But my immediate response to that is that we've seen it happen in other countries and we've seen it be successful. We've seen that the more peaceful an carceral environment is, the more people will be reintegrated safely into the community and not recidivate. And I also see some examples in the chat as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, I just noticed there's a hand up and there's a number of people in the chat. I'm going to start with the hand up. Walter, do you want to unmute yourself and give us your question?
I think I'm unmuted. I too had to look up carceral, and I feel a little self-conscious because my own educational background, if I look back far enough, is in criminology. So I find your point, your discussion very interesting. You've already talked about it quite a bit. I think at this point, I would simply ask if you have some specific references you can pass on to any of us, however, via chat or someplace. I would be very interested in following up on those, and of course, ultimately to find out more about what you have in mind as far as implementing these kinds of policy changes in what we hope will be your new job.
Definitely. I'm just taking a note to make sure I send out those references. I have a lot of them, so I'd love to share those with you. And, you know, I really appreciate two things about what you said. The first thing is that you opened up with being a little self-conscious due to your educational background. And I'm glad you spoke up, because that's what we need, is people who may feel like they're on the fence about this to speak up and say, hey, this is interesting and I want to learn more. I think that really opens the door to conversations that can make these changes happen, which kind of leads into the next thing I was going to say is your point about implementation. I love talking about implementation because I'm really passionate about policy, but policy doesn't get us very far if it's not implemented effectively. So I would love to reach out further, and if there's time, I can put it in the chat. Otherwise, I can also follow up with an email to provide those references. And as far as implementation, I think that's where things like the Community Management Board come in, or these committees like the one I was recently invited to with the Social and Justice Equity Commission, because that's where we can get these conversations started at the community level to try and decide how implementation would be most effective. And I think that a critical piece of that is having voices at the table of people with lived experience in that justice system.
All right, thank you, Walter. You could put your hand down. That would be great. So again, there's a number of things in the chat. Unless somebody interrupts me and says, hey, there are some questions in the chat, I'm going to continue with my questions. Okay. Sarah, regarding
yes, there were some questions in the chat.
Emily.
Would you like
Sorry, do we want to go to the chat, John?
Yeah, how about Cindy Tufford? You want to unmute Cindy? And
yeah. So my question is, of the 4 candidates running for County Commission District 5, besides yourself, there is another registered Democrat. How can you comment on how you distinguish yourself from your Democratic opponent?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you so much. When I'm canvassing, I actually am, I canvass using Vote Builder, of course. So I talk to a lot of people who are like, yes, I'm a Democrat. I'm going to vote for you because you're a Democrat. So I have to speak to this often because there is another Democrat in the race. And the way I would distinguish myself from him are, the first thing is I won't accept any corporate funding for my campaign. It's a fully 100% grassroots funded campaign, and I don't believe that corporate money should be in politics at all. The second thing is, with his development background and property management background, he has voted in favor of some pretty dangerous initiatives, such as the development at Hicks Lake, where they want to take down a lot of, forest area around Hicks Lake and a lot of, really critical environmental areas that we really need to keep, and to build a luxury apartment complex right on the water. And he voted in favor of that. There was a strong community movement against that, but he still voted in favor of that, and that's something that I would have voted against. So I think that he's a lot more likely to cave to corporate and development interests, which is something that I'm strongly opposed to. And that's the biggest thing that comes to mind when I think about what distinguishes us. So that's usually, that's the example that I would give just initially, because it's one thing that I really stand for a lot. It's actually one of my priority platforms to take care of the land that we occupy. And I don't believe that his voting history or values align with that. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis, I don't see any more in the chat.
Okay. All right, Emily, regarding gun violence, when we sent out the questionnaire, you proposed strong measures to keep guns out of the hands of those who should not have them. Could you tell us a little bit about what those measures are? And you appear to be muted. Is this possible?
Thank you.
Better.
Yeah, definitely. So this kind of goes back to what we discussed with the carceral system, because gun violence is a really prime example and a front-facing example of what we're talking about when we say we need to build safer communities. And I do advocate for policies that would allow people who, when I say shouldn't have guns, I don't mean to infringe upon anybody's rights here, but I've also, admittedly, I have lived experience with mental health challenges. And there was a time when I came to my parents and loved ones and said, hey, I'm scared that I can't keep myself safe, and I would like to make sure I can't get my hands on this. Is there a legal process I can go through to sign this my rights over while I'm going through this? Fortunately, I've healed a lot and don't foresee that ever becoming an issue again. But I wish that there was a system in which individuals could openly admit and feel safe about admitting when they shouldn't be somebody who should own a gun. I've also had a lot of people in my life who have been dealing with mental health crises as well. And they're like, I don't own a gun because I know that I would use it against myself or maybe possibly somebody else. And that's really scary. But I think that if we can develop support systems for people who do deal with mental health issues on a frequent basis or on a really severe basis, if we can build an accountability system for those people to where they feel like they can talk about not being around guns, then I think that would help us build a safer community in general. But I don't think right now that exists. I think right now when people consider losing access to guns, a lot of people feel like it's infringing upon their rights, or they feel like they can't speak up because they'll be detained, whether it's in a carceral system or a mental health institution where they're afraid to go. So I definitely think that by expanding access to treatment, we can handle this issue in a really positive way by providing people with the mental health support that they need to not resort to gun violence. And I think that that really needs to start at the community level. I think that that could be something that county commissioners could really, champion policies that support a reduction in gun violence in our community.
All right, thank you. Homelessness, sounds like you have some experience with dealing with homelessness, but talk to us a little bit about what your approach would be to dealing with the homeless problem in Thurston County.
Definitely. So the first thing that comes to mind is the county level home fund, which I'm a strong advocate for. I think that we need more support around initiatives like the county level home fund. I also think that we could really bring up innovative policies such as social housing, which has proven to be successful in Seattle. Sorry, I saw a chat pop up and got distracted. But in terms of dealing with homelessness, I think that investing in more affordable housing initiatives is definitely the way to go, but not just affordable housing, supportive housing too, to provide those wraparound services that people need when they are experiencing homelessness. Because we saw recently with the sweep of the camp along Deschutes Parkway by Capitol Lake, there was a big push to get people into long-term hotel stays for a couple of months. And we saw that that went really poorly. The implementation of that did not go over well because people weren't offered supportive services. And it was a perfect opportunity to get in and intervene when it was a critical time, because the community-based organizations that helped people stay in those hotels, they knew where people were. Whereas providing services to people who are living on the streets can be really tricky because you lose touch with them and they're being moved around frequently. And that makes it really hard to support a healthy continuity of care between organizations. I think that also a collaborative environment between these organizations, not only on community-based organizations, but with governmental structures as well. We really need to be communicating and working together on the problem, because like we saw with the hotels, you put people into a different environment and then you expect whoever's managing that environment to just take care of the problem. But then you have a bunch of hotel staff who are trying to manage people with mental health issues and they don't have the skill set for that. We also see the same thing when people enter the justice system, because components of their life are criminalized due to homelessness, and you have people going to jail without receiving the mental health support that they need. So I think that the wraparound service aspect is critical, because you can move people around all the time, but it's just going to perpetuate the problem until they really get the supportive services that they need. So let's see. I'm trying to think. There was a second half of your question I feel like I didn't get to. Could you possibly repeat your question? Sorry.
I don't know that I could really repeat my whole question, but it sounded to me like you gave us a pretty good answer. So I would
Okay.
be happy enough with that.
Okay. I do want to add one more thing too, is that in terms of providing that support, one thing that I think was really important and actually would have been really successful if we capitalized on it was the scattered site plan, which expanded encampment support in Thurston County. And I don't really know why that fell through. I know that one of the sites that was part of the scattered site plan was that Deschutes Parkway camp, and then it got swept before the scattered site plan really had time to grow. And that was really disappointing, because if we could bring back the scattered site plan and implement it effectively, I think that that would provide critical support that's really needed to get people into housing.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis, David Lovell has a question he'd like to ask.
Great, David, unmute yourself. Can we unmute? There we go.
I'm unmuted now. Yes. Hello, Emily. I actually don't think there's time for me to ask all the questions I would have to ask. Let me just tell you that in 1978, I walked into McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary to teach philosophy to a bunch of prisoners. Since then, I have spent 45 years working in and around the criminal justice system around the very same issues that that you're talking about here today, including the issues of homelessness and mental health. And right now, I'm advising the Department of Corrections on how to reduce its solitary population by 90% in response to advocates such as yourself, effective advocates such as yourself. So I guess I don't think there's time for us to have the kind of discussion that would be required, but I'm if you should choose to pursue this, and you want to have further discussions and you're open to some education on these topics, I'd be willing to help. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I'll write that down right now because I will be in touch with you shortly after this call. I appreciate that. And thank you for the work that you do. That's really important.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, hey, is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Just give you a few minutes is there anything that hasn't been covered that you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, sorry, I was finishing up my note, but definitely I think that there are a couple things that we didn't get to about environmental concerns that I'd like to touch on a little bit. And a couple of those things, I'll try to keep it brief. I know I can be long-winded, but one thing that I've been learning a lot about, which I'm really passionate about, and I'm hoping that I have a chance to have my voice at the table, which is the shoreline master plan. And I was told by one commissioner that it'll probably be done and implemented before the new seats are filled. And I had another commissioner say they're not sure if that's the case because there's been so much back and forth. And one thing that I know is when we're talking about aquatic wildlife, primarily salmon, salmon are declining really rapidly, and that's a huge problem, especially being here in the Pacific Northwest, where it's been such a staple in so many communities. And so I'm a big advocate for increasing the riparian buffer zones around bodies of water. And when I heard that they were trying to settle on 50 feet, I was really kind of appalled by that. I don't think 50 feet is enough at all. I've been noticing around town that I've just been getting a more visual understanding of it because I've looked at bodies of water that are protected areas and how close development is happening, including septic being put in right next to those protected areas, right at 50 feet. And that's not okay. That's not right. So I would definitely advocate for at least 250 feet riparian buffers, especially around major bodies of water. And another way that I think that we could support the infrastructure in our community is by going through the nexus study process so that we can really gauge how much we need to be charging these corporate developers in terms of impact fees, because I know we've been waiving impact fees for corporate developers in our community, and I don't think that that's right either, because we know we're growing, we know we're experiencing a lot of growth in our area, but if we can't keep up with that growth by supporting the infrastructure around these new market rate housing complexes, then that's not okay. So I think that by implementing the charging the full impact fees, I think that that would be a really strong way that we could support the infrastructure and environment in our area as well. So I wanted to touch on that. I could go on and on about environmental stuff, but I'll leave it at that unless there are any specific questions, and then I can speak to other important things like renewable energy or fossil fuels or things like that.
We have a few minutes if you have something else that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I definitely, oh geez, I just get so excited. It's hard to decide what I want to talk about. But,
No, really.
so in terms of renewable energy sources, one thing that I am a big proponent for is public power. I have been looking into, PUD lately, and I think that utilities really need to go, I don't think that Puget Sound Energy is doing a great job at utilizing renewable energy sources in our area. So that's something that I would really love to explore more, is how we can really create a sustainable environment, because I care a lot about the community members here. I grew up here, and I want to give back to the community that has given so much to me, including the youth in our community, because we need to leave behind a healthy world for them. And so I think that a lot of the renewable energy conversations, we really do need to focus on developers who are coming in and destroying the planet and then being on, they're on their way because they're just going from one place to the next, and kind of reshifting that to where we support local builders who really care about like affordable housing, and making sure that we achieve net zero in terms of development initiatives, because if we can achieve net zero to where we're not harming the environment, but we're still providing housing for those who need it, then that's something that I think would be really important I do often hear people say things like, you know, I'm so angry that the government's trying to get me to switch from my gas stove to my electric stove. And I actually empathize with people like that because people survive off of appliances that use gas. But I think that we need to start shifting the accountability from the individuals to the actual, you know, corporate developers and people who are coming in and just causing so much damage, because we live in a society that shames people for almost anything these days. And so when I, you know, hear my physical therapist say that she's being told that she needs to get rid of her gas stove and she's angry, I do empathize with that, because I think that we need to hold accountable the people, you know, the millionaires who are actually causing a lot of damage, and not the individual person who's just trying to survive and get by. So that's something that, you know, traditionally I've heard a lot of people who align with my values say like, no, we really do need to switch these individual homes to something different. And I think that if we rely on a large scale on renewable sources like solar and wind power as opposed to fossil fuels, then that's a, you know, that's definitely a slam dunk. That's how we need to approach the issue, not by guilting people who are just trying to get by on an individual basis. So that's, I think, the last thing I'll say on that.
Okay, question for you. Do you know of any issues specific to District 5 that interest you?
I do, and some of them are actually like at the city council level, so I wouldn't have much say. Are you interested in examples like that, or are you more interested in District 5, like county level things that I would have a say in?
Since you're representing District 5, be at the county level, things that might be of particular interest to that district.
Well, there are things like the Hicks Lake development as an example. I know I already talked about that, but I have been really researching a lot of countywide, not just specific to District 5, so it's hard for me to think about examples specifically in District 5 other than that Hicks Lake thing, which got me really fired up because I learned about that recently. And I was upset that there was so much pushback from the community, but I mean, again, that was a city council vote though. So I guess I'll just be honest and say, I don't really know of District 5 specific examples that are controlled at the commission level, but I can definitely look into that more.
Okay. We're going to drop your website into our chat, and I'd like to hear a little bit about how your campaign is going, endorsements, organization and events, fundraising. How's it going?
It's actually going really, really well. We've raised about $7,000. I don't know if my campaign manager is in the group too. If I'm wrong about that, Sarah, you can totally put that in the chat and correct me. But I think that we've raised around 7,000 now. My goal for the primary is 10,000, so I definitely still think that we can get there. I have a really solid campaign team, two campaign managers, as well as a treasurer, a co-treasurer, and a field manager. So we've got a pretty solid group that shows up consistently for canvassing, phone banking. We meet every week. I have a few key endorsements from Robin Vasquez, Helen Wheatley. I'm working on some endorsements from my union that I'm a part of, Local 443. I just had an interview with them yesterday. I'm also waiting to hear back from Thurston County Democratic Women on an endorsement, and Clark Gilman has endorsed me as well. So now that I started kind of tackling the individual endorsements in the beginning, and now that things have been, things are well on their way, I'm reaching out to more groups. Let's see. As far as fundraising goes, I'm working on planning another fundraiser. I'm thinking like we'll do a summer event really hopefully soon here, because primary is coming up really soon. But in terms of fundraising, I'm really proud to look at my PDC contributions, because the list, you just have to scroll and scroll and scroll because I have so many individual contributions. And that's really what I'm aiming for here, is as a grassroots funded campaign, small donations matter a lot to me because I won't take any corporate money. So, you know, I have a lot of family support. My parents have max donated. Robin Vasquez max donated to me, and I'm really proud of the fundraising efforts that we've achieved so far.
Great, thank you. Cindy has her hand up. Cindy, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, this isn't really a question for Emily, but just a comment. You were asked about specific issues in District 5, county issues. And I would comment that I live in Jubilee and I've been here 6.5 years. And in that time, right next door, Silverhawk was developed and they were allowed to put septic in as their sewer. And we're pretty close to the sound here. And I would just think that that was somewhere down the line, that's going to be a problem. Here we are in Jubilee, right next, I mean, we're in Lacey, we have regular city sewer, and Silverhawk is county property, and it was allowed to put septic in. So that's something that you might want to look at, that the whole idea of new development in the county, even close to the water sources, putting septic in.
Thank you. I'm taking a note of that right now. I actually live right down the street from you, closer to Tonge State Park. So when I'm canvassing around here in our area, a lot of people do talk to me about septic stuff, and I think that that's a really good point. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. You can put your hand down unless you have another question. Is there anything else from anyone? I'm going to call that a no. So Emily, thank you so much for your time. And John is raising his hand. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so just to everybody who's here with us tonight, thanks for showing up. And just want to let you know that at our website, olympianindivisible.org, we have information. We have the completed questionnaires for several of the candidates, these ones tonight included, which there are other topics that we asked about that they commented on, so you can read those questionnaires. These interviews will be posted. If you missed, we're going to be having several more interviews coming up over the next few days with other candidates. And to the two candidates who are with us tonight, thanks so much. And just to let you know, we plan on finishing our endorsement process by the end of the month. And so we'll see how that goes. And thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me.
Great, thanks again.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you.
everybody.
We're going to be, the endorsement team is going to be presenting the results of their work at a Zoom on June 24th. And if you're interested in sitting in on that, listening to that, anyone here, the link to that is going to be on our website as well, in the Olympia Indivisible website. So you can.
Yeah, you do have to be a member of Olympia Indivisible to attend that one.
To vote.
But anybody here can join.
Vote.
No.
To vote, you
To
have
vote.
Not
Am I wrong about that?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yes, anybody can attend.
Okay.
And that presentation will also be on the website after we're done with it as well. So, and the recording. So that's it then for this evening. I'm looking at Sharon to see if I forgot something.
No, fine, but I think the endorsement team will stay for a brief debrief after, and everybody else, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.